Hi, everyone. Hi. Hello. So grateful that you're here with me. I'm so delighted to share with you and answer any questions you have. It's always very interesting watching yourself on video. So I just watched that talk with you, brought up some definite things that I would love to share with you. And really, the intention of this is to be in conversation about the talk, anything that came up during that talk, and in the conversation of a return to wholeness. And I always like to start with gratitude. So I want to say how grateful I am to AJ. I know AJ's on here right now, and to Wholehearted Press, Wholehearted Studios for creating that talk. You know, we were in the studio a year ago, and this was such a process, a lengthy process for us to create this, because we were about to do this right when COVID hit, and we weren't able to film a lot of things in any studio, really, quite frankly, in any large studio for 3 years. So we are so grateful that we got to go in and create not only this talk, but so many other things. But I wanted to just ask if there are any questions or comments. Please drop them in the chat, because I really want to answer anything that comes up for you as you watch this. And I was just aware as I was watching the talk and listening myself and thinking about how I can hear this from my own perspective in this very moment. It really reminded me of so many different things. And I wanted to start with this conversation of what it actually means to be unharmed and unharmable. And this is something that has been very present for me over the last few years, and certainly in the last few months. This awareness that so many of us, so many people I know, feel damaged and feel broken. And when I look at the world and look at what's happening in the world, I can see that this is a common experience of humanity, that so many of us do feel damaged and broken in some way. And as I said in the talk, this creates the frequency, this creates the vibration, this creates the way we view ourselves and the world. And this becomes the way that we actually create what we call reality. And I noticed in that talk, I was very aware that I talked so much about my own journey, my own recovery, but how much my own sense of damagedness, brokenness created the experience of my life. And how then, of course, substance use just became a natural way to manage that. And that really recovery is about returning to wholeness, that it really is not about moving towards something, that it really is about coming home to the truth of who and what we are. And I'm going to read the comments in a moment, but I wanted to say this before I do that. I wanted to say that working in the addiction treatment field and in behavioral health in general, there is so often this focus on what's broken about our clients. Or if you're someone who's in recovery and you've gone to different recovery support groups, or maybe you've gone to treatment, the question I have for you is, in some way, did you feel like people were viewing you as broken? Did you start to believe a message that there was something fundamentally different about you because you have an addiction or something wrong with you? And for anyone watching right now who isn't in recovery for addiction, perhaps there's other areas of your life where you have felt broken or damaged. And what I want to ask is, what has that created in your life? And more importantly than what is that created in your life, I want to ask what the other possibility or a different possibility is for you. What is possible for you if you were to unlearn that and to have a different experience of yourself? And really, what might get created if you were to understand that there's this place within you that's unharmed and unharmable as a starting point? This recognition that we came into the world as a whole and perfect being, and that's who we are fundamentally. So the trauma and the disconnection and the shame isn't who we are. We're actually this whole and perfect being. What would that create for you? Or a different question I can ask is, what has that created for you? What that knowing has created for you? I'm thinking of my friend, Adriana Popescu, Dr. Adriana Popescu. Her book, What If You're Not As Effed Up As You Think You Are? I just love that title so much, and we've collaborated a lot. And what might happen, or what has happened for you as you shifted that question, why am I so effed up, to what are the infinite possibilities? And she's one person, along with many other people I collaborate with, where we're really in that question, what might happen if? What would happen if I'd understand that there's a place that's whole and perfect? And what would get created if I were to live in that frequency rather than that frequency of brokenness? So I really encourage you, if you're watching right now, please ask me questions, please make comments. I'm going to read a couple of these right now. Mary says, thank you, TJ, for shining. Thank you, the beautiful light that you are. Thank you. I appreciate that. Wholehearted is asking a question. Mariah from Instagram, how can I help support friends and family members who are in recovery but still feel broken and ashamed? I love that question, Mariah. And it's very interesting. And I'm going to say that my response to is actually even interesting to me right now. I would say, when you ask, how can I support? I would ask, how are you viewing them? Right? How am I viewing them? And sometimes when someone is struggling, if they're in an active addiction or if they're in recovery, but you still hear them using language that they're broken or different or unique in some way, I always start with, how am I perceiving this person right in this moment? What might get created if I were to view them as a whole and perfect and infinite being? Because there is so much power in the observer. When I think about Mary Helen, who I talked about in the talk, who was the first person in my life, really one of the first people who really saw me as an infinite being, who could see past my own sense of brokenness. So Mariah, I was that person, right? And she was the person that's asking the question that you're asking right now. And that's very striking to me because I felt so damaged and broken. And I'm sure that my language mirrored that. And I'm sure my frequency mirrored that. And she came in and she would say, darling, you're so precious. And I would, as I said, feel very, very like I couldn't take it in. But there was something so powerful in her witnessing of me in a unique and different way than my own brokenness that started to create a possibility. If she thinks I'm precious, who am I to think I'm broken? It started to become this awareness that I had that was so much more than just a thought. The felt sense of how I felt about myself when I was in her presence had such a powerful healing quality that I started to view myself differently. So, in short, or in long, perhaps, what I'm saying is it's really less about, because you asked how you can support. And it was interesting because in my mind, I thought, what would I say to the person? And then I realized it's really more about how I'm being with them. It's really more about how I'm viewing them and the energy that I'm bringing into that relationship. And then, the observer effect is so powerful. And we know now with quantum mechanics, we're measuring that when we perceive, how we perceive an experiment changes the outcome. It is so big, really. It is so simple, and yet it's so huge. If I'm viewing someone as damaged and broken, there's a higher probability that they will experience themselves as damaged and broken. So the number one thing I can do is see them as an infinite being. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else have any questions or comments? I'm not even sure who's on here. Maybe just say hi. Tell me who's watching. Maybe I know you, maybe I don't, but I'm always so grateful for the connections that we have. I think back about, when we went through the experience where some of us, not all of us, but, kind of pulled back from the world a little, and we had technology to keep this connection alive. And so I'm wondering, put your name in there, say if we know each other, if we've ever met. And if not, that's okay, because, I can always talk. So let's see who said hi. Hi. Thank you so much. I'm in Kerala, India right now. Oh my gosh. I have to share with you my Kerala journey because in 1992, I believe, I went to India for the first time, and I went to Kerala. It was the first place I stepped off the plane from Sri Lanka. And I was going to stay at Amma's ashram. And if you don't know, I'm guessing you who said that you're in Kerala knows who Amma is. But if anyone is watching, Amma is a guru in southern India in Kerala, who I had the opportunity to meet. That is where I am, of course. Yeah, I imagine that's such a beautiful thing. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling the energy of the ashram there, but I want to be really transparent with all of you who are watching, because some of you might relate to this. In 1992, I went to India to Amma's ashram, and I went with Mary Helen, who was my mentor, my spiritual teacher I talked about. And I was quite young, and I'm trying to do math here. I was about 6 years sober, and I had met Amma many times. She used to come to Dallas where I lived, and she actually stayed at my friend's place. So I had had an opportunity, and this will sound a little odd, but for some of you, it might not. If you know Amma, I knew her before she was famous. And all I mean by that is I had the opportunity to sit with her in these really small groups, which was really powerfully transformational for me. And she was another person, this enlightened being in her presence and feeling her spiritual energy that had done so much healing for me. I remember the first time I met her in the late 80s, I walked into the room and I felt her energy and I sobbed for about 10 minutes. And I had this profound experience of not only knowing myself very deeply, my true self instantaneously, but also I got to feel the layers of the shame and trauma that I had put on top of that. And so the reason I say I want to share be transparent and tell the truth of my experience of going to Kerala is I had this expectation that I was going to India to have a profound spiritual experience, and that I was going to be absolutely enlightened, and that this was going to be the most blissful experience of my life. And I'm going to tell you what really happened. We arrived. It felt like the middle of the night, with the time change and all the travel from the States. And when I walked through the wall of the ashram, I felt the intensity of the love hit me. Like it was, that is the presence of unconditional love. Absolutely. And that is what happened is I felt that wave of intensity. And at that time, I could feel it hit my heart and open me. And I immediately started protecting myself from it. And that to me now sounds so counterintuitive. At the time, the visceral experience was it was almost too much love for me. And I intended to stay in the ashram for a month, and I stayed for just a few days. And I said, I have to go. And I remember going into Mary Helen's room and saying, Mary Helen, I don't think I can stay here. And I have a lot of guilt and shame about leaving right now. And she said, you need to follow your heart. And what happened is, because of that intensity of love that I experienced, and because I wasn't in some way quite ready to receive it, I put this barrier up, and I left the ashram after about maybe 5 or 6 days. And I ended up traveling solo through India for another month. And I thought I was going to have this spiritual experience that was blissful, and that I was going to, be in Amma's presence, because of course, in those 7 days, I did get to sit with her. I did get to sit with Amma, with just a handful of people. And I did get to feel the love, but there was that defendedness within me that I was recoiling from that love. And what I want to say about that to me is so powerful, is I did have a profound spiritual experience in India in 1992 when I went to Amma's ashram, but it wasn't at all what I expected. The spiritual experience that I received from going to the ashram at that time was to see all the ways that I had guarded myself and protected myself from the very love that I had desired all of my life. And so the experience of recoiling from that and leaving and going on a journey on my own throughout India for the next several weeks was so powerful for me, because I got to see in a beautiful way the place where I was stuck, the place where it was too scary for me to receive that pure love, and the place where I came to understand that I had a choice, that I could actually open my heart to that love. But my path took me several years. And when I went back to India in 2005, yes, I had a very, very different experience. And I went to Varanasi. I actually write about that in my book. I think in my book, Conscious Being, but I might write about it also in Conscious Recovery. But for now, I'm just going to say that pure love changed my life, but not in the way I expected it to. So I am so grateful to be connected with you all the way from Kerala. AJ says, Spencer from Instagram asks, any advice for parents on how to talk to teenage children about what it means to be whole? I'll say in a similar way of what I said to the first question that Mariah asked, I would say, how am I viewing my teenager? And I have a very close relationship with my nephew. At a very young age, we bonded very deeply. And even though I'm not his father, in a lot of ways, I played the father figure. And when he moved into his teenage years, I realized that I had some projections onto him. And I realized, it's so interesting doing what I do, because I talk about how the power of beholding someone as a whole and perfect being is so strong and so important and so powerful. And I realized I had judgments about him. And so I would always start with asking myself, how am I seeing my teenager? How am I seeing their behavior? And am I able to see that place of preciousness and wholeness within them? And if I'm going to be in a conversation with a teenager, because the one thing I love about teenagers is there is no BS with them. They know exactly what's up, right? So like they will be really honest for the most part about what they're perceiving. I would ask a question like, do you remember a time that you felt really happy? Do you remember a time that you felt really connected with yourself? Tell me more about that time. What was the happiest time in your life? What did that feel like? Do you think there's still a place within you that you have access to, that place of wholeness? I always start with that, because I think it's really important to see if someone can get in touch with that. And that's kind of like my experience I talk about with Mary Helen, and I just shared about with Amma. They could hold the love for me that I wasn't able to, or didn't have access to, or was too afraid to feel. Someone did that for me. So I think it would start with, how am I viewing them? How am I beholding them? And then asking those questions. Do you remember a time that you felt whole and complete? Do you remember a time that you were the most happy? Tell me about that. And do you believe, or can you understand, or might there be a place within you that that is still true, and that you could access that? That's what I would do. And then maybe there's an authentic conversation. The other thing that I think can be really powerful, of course, with teenagers, is to share our own journey of what it felt like to be a teenager. But I tread lightly on that one, because, the eye roll can happen for sure. Okay. AJ also says, Sadie from Instagram asks, does 12 steps help with trauma? I would say, I'm going to share a story about it. First of all, I met Mary Helen in a 12-step community. So I have to say, absolutely, my own journey of meeting this beautiful woman within the 12-step community, who helped me heal my trauma in ways that were just so incredibly powerful. So I have to say yes. And what I will also say is that the beauty of the 12-step community to me is that it's very broad, that that can be the light and the shadow, right? And what I mean by that is, my good friend Ted shared once at a 12-step meeting, and he said, my topic for today is myth and folklore of 12 steps. In other words, the stuff that people say and do around 12 steps, that's not really the essence of it. The essence to me of the 12-step movement, the founders were very much into some very deep spirituality. And they were really, I think, in a very powerful way, shifting the paradigm about how we view addiction. It was also a long time ago. And anytime there's a group of people that find a way out, a path that helps them, there can become, people who can become very dogmatic about it, right? Like I was that person. I shared a little bit about it in the video. I became very rigid that there's only this one way. And the reason I say all of that is, as with most questions, yes and no, right? So I think there are, in my experience, in my personal experience, and this was me, so I can say this is how I was. I hadn't yet healed a lot of my trauma. And when I was sponsoring people, because here's the thing, I can't help someone heal their trauma any more than I've healed my own. Working in the addiction treatment field, this is what I really offer when I work with clinicians. I really can't hold a space for someone to go any deeper in their healing process than I have myself. So, what I see sometimes in 12 step, very well intentioned people, maybe 18 months, 2 years, 3 years sober, who haven't yet had the opportunity, and as was true for me, to do a lot of the healing. So maybe there could be some religiosity or some rigidity around the 12 step is the one way. I mean, for example, I've heard people in 12 step meetings say, forget about trauma. That's not the root of it. We have a disease, and they're just focused on that one thing. And so they'll say, you don't need to do anything but not drink or do the 12 steps. And that's the only thing. And Mary Helen, who absolutely loved the 12 steps, would say to me, you can keep your feet in 12 steps, but there's an entire universe of healing available to you. And it's always interesting to me with any group of people if they say this is the one and only way. And there are, of course, a handful of people in 12 step that have that. And then there are so many other people in 12 steps that say, this has been such a healing path for me. It has helped me heal my trauma, but I'm aware that there are other paths. And so I say it's such a beautiful place in the world, 12 steps, because for the most part, you can walk into any room, a 12-step room anywhere in the world. And for the most part, you'll find a group of people who are willing to help. And that's just priceless. And in the same way, I think there's always more. There are always other paths of healing. Sometimes people, I think, work with the 12 steps that can keep it more on the surface and not take the deeper dive into healing trauma. I know that was a very long answer, but it's nuanced, right? I can't say yes or no with that. AJ says, I would like to hear you speak more about the challenges of self-judgment. Okay. The challenges, well, I mean, our narrative creates our reality. Our narrative creates the energy, or maybe the energy creates the narrative. Either way, we come into the world as whole and perfect beings. That's who we are. And we come into the world and we have experiences that can cause us to start believing we're broken or damaged. And that's the shame piece, right? The traumatic event can cause us to disconnect from our true nature. Therefore, we decide we're broken, and that's the experience of shame. The experience of shame is a vibration, I think, more than even a narrative, but the narrative, in other words, the thoughts in my mind, the tapes that keep playing over and over again, are an indication of the deeply held core false belief. So I don't think that the words actually create reality. I mean, they do, but there's something much deeper. Really, the words allow us to see how we perceive ourselves. So some of us believe, and I was one of these people, and I can still sometimes do this. I have this idea that if I'm hard on myself, even if it's unconscious or if I'm critical in some way, that it's serving me. But the truth is, it's keeping me stuck in a belief that I'm limited. That I'm broken or that I'm damaged. So the question is, what are the challenges of self-judgment? Judgment constricts and curiosity expands. Anytime I notice I have a judgment, which I do all the time because I think that's what the mind is hardwired to do, safe, unsafe, good, bad, us and them, my people, the other. That's what the mind does. And if anyone has figured out how to completely eradicate that, I would love to know how. For me, it's more about becoming the observer of that. So if I notice I have a judgment, I say, isn't it interesting that I'm judging myself or someone in this way? Let me be curious about that. I wonder what might get created if I were to see this through a different lens. When it comes to self-judgment, I would say to myself, isn't it interesting that I have this idea about myself? I wonder if I can get in touch with the frequency that's connected with this judgment. Just feel it in my body. And then say, I wonder what it would feel like for me to be free of that. What would it feel like if I were to have a different idea about myself? What if I could be curious about what that would feel like and also say, I wonder where did I get this idea? Not let me figure out why I judge myself so I can get rid of it, because I did that for decades. Instead, oh, wow, isn't it interesting that I'm judging myself? What does it feel like when I have this judgment? What would get created if I were to have a different idea about myself? What else is possible here? I'll go back to Adriana. She has questions. We have a process called living in the question, which we put in the workbook, Conscious Recovery. But it's really about, rather than having a judgment, let's go into some questions. Let's go into some expansiveness. What else is possible here? What would get created if I were to have a different idea about myself? Okay, let me read another question. AJ, in my head, I understand the concept of having a place within myself that is unharmable, but in my heart, I often feel unlovable. People might love what I can give them or what I provide. Okay. So I want to go, thank you, AJ, and thank you for your honesty with that. I think any of us, I'm gonna speak now for the entirety of humanity. Any of us can relate to that, I would guess. The idea that I'm unharmable versus the experience of that. And one of the core concepts in my work is core false beliefs and brilliant strategies. And I talked a little bit about it in the talk. We come into the world as whole and perfect beings. We decide these things about ourselves, these lies about ourselves. Those become the frequency or the operating system at which we really are. We're in the world as. We're emitting that, we're attracting that, but we're also making choices based on that. In other words, if I'm walking around believing I'm unlovable, that's a frequency, and I can walk into a room of 50 people and I'll find the person through a vibrational match to confirm the core false belief. And I used to think that was a bad thing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I keep attracting these unavailable people, right? First of all, what does that even mean? What do I want them to be available for? But when I understood the power of frequency and the alignment of frequencies, I would say, gosh, look how powerful I am. I found this person that would tell me I'm unlovable because that's what I believe about myself. So if I start to change that vibration, if I start to change that idea about myself, I can start to see that that same thing will work in a different way. Now, what I'm not saying is, okay, everyone, let's just change that core false belief, because nothing could be truer but less useful than to say, I shouldn't be thinking that about myself. I shouldn't have this judgment, or to try to talk myself out of the core false belief. Instead, what we want to do is play with this idea. And it goes back to what I was saying about the teenager. Can I remember a time before I felt broken? Can I remember a time? And what happens with the core false belief, and AJ, I'm going back to what you're asking, the core false belief then has a brilliant strategy that's connected to it. So in my case, I believed I was unlovable. And so my strategy was, please love me, please love me, please love me. We call that anxious attachment style, right? Oh my gosh, I'm so anxious if this person doesn't text back. I mean, back in the day, we didn't have text, but now we would say, why haven't they texted? Oh my gosh, I am unlovable. Oh my gosh, maybe they hate me. Oh my gosh, maybe they were in an accident. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And it's this experience of anxiety instead of, okay, what is the core false belief connected with this? Let me get in touch with that, and let me start to care for myself from the place of origin. And I don't mean, let me figure out the exact moment I decided it. Most of us don't know that. Some of us do, but most of us don't. I'm saying my younger self decided that not only with limited information, but without even the cognitive ability to understand. So this is really more of an energy thing. Let me be present with that tender, beautiful being that decided this. And sometimes in being aware of that, we can get in touch with who we were before that. Who was I before I decided that? And for me, I can actually remember what the feeling of freedom felt like as a little kid. And I can remember how that gradually started to close off. And when I can get in touch with the energy of that freedom, then I can say, not through my mind, I wonder if there's a place within me that's unharmed and unharmable. I can say, I remember. That's who I am. Spending time with that, cultivating that awareness of that essential self. To me, it's a twofold path. It's getting in touch with, spending dedicated time, feeling into the energy of that infinite being, that time before the domestication of the human, that essential self. And also the second part of the twofold path is pretty much questioning and unlearning everything I've ever been taught and everything I've ever believed that's counter to that. Okay, thank you, AJ. Okay, the internet connection keeps dropping this morning here. I pray this will be uploaded later. I believe it will be. I think that's absolutely true. Okay, so we are coming to the end. It's now 7 o'clock here. I'm not sure what time it is in Kerala, but I know it's not 7 p.m. If there's any, AJ's asking, no, Wholehearted is asking, are there any final questions? So I'll give you a moment with that, because of course I always have closing thoughts. Okay, well, I want to close the way I began, and that is gratitude. Gratitude for each of you who is watching right now or who might be watching this at a later date. And what I want to say to you is, I see a question coming in. Will you close with a meditation for us? Yes, I will do that. Absolutely, AJ. What I want to say to you in this moment is, if no one has yet told you today, you are a whole and perfect being. And what I want to invite you to do, as AJ is requesting, we're going to close with this short mindfulness process. I just invite you for this moment to move within. And if it feels right for you, gently closing your eyes. And we just take a nice, deep, conscious breath together. And on the exhale, simply allowing yourself to get in touch with what you're experiencing. Maybe you have thoughts about our conversation. Maybe you're noticing how it feels to be in your body. Maybe you can get in touch with an emotion. Just allowing yourself to be curious about all of that. Where am I at physically? Where am I at intellectually? Where am I at emotionally? And then the invitation is to simply drop down into that place of inner stillness that is beyond your physicality, beyond your intellect, beyond your emotions. It's that essential beingness, your true nature. We simply allow ourselves to drop down into that place and feel into the frequency of that place of inner calm. And I invite you to breathe from this place. Getting in touch with what that place within you feels like, that place within you that is unharmed and unharmable, that place of infinite beingness. And as you have a felt sense of what that feels like, I invite you for just a few moments to rest in that. Simply noticing how it feels to be present with yourself in this way. And also knowing that this place is always available every moment. It's just one breath away. So now I want you to imagine the frequency, the energy of that beingness, that true nature, expanding outward and filling up every particle of your being. Spreading outward now, filling up whatever room or environment you're in. Spreading outward to fill up whatever home, apartment, or building you're in. Outward into your community. Taking a moment here to just feel this energy spreading outward, covering the entire earth. And even beyond the earth, this energy, this effervescent beingness that you are, fills the entire universe. Just noticing how it feels to be in this expansive energy and to recognize this is the truth of who and what you are. You are an infinite being. And so just taking a few moments here to refocus on the breath, taking a couple of deep inhales and slow conscious exhales. And so we close by feeling into the gratitude that is present in this moment, grateful for our time together, grateful for any messages we received, grateful for this experience, and grateful to know that because we've come together in this unique way, throughout the world, there has been a shift in the awareness of the planet. Someone across the world is experiencing themselves in this moment as a whole and complete being, simply because we are knowing this for the entire cosmos. And so we are so grateful. We release this now. We let it go. We let it be. So much gratitude for our time together. One last breath. And then as it feels right for you, I invite you to gently open your eyes. Thank you, everyone. So incredibly grateful for our time together. Peace and blessings to all of you.